What's up, people? I am back for another video. Today, we are reviewing Quantum of Solace, and like I said last week, this is one I've never seen before, so I watched this the first time, and I gotta say, I'm gonna be honest, I was a little disappointed. I was initially a bit more positive, but then, the more and more I thought, I'm not gonna say it's horrible, but my beef is that, really, it's not a Bond movie. It feels like a generic, don't get me wrong, I love the Bourne movies. I do. But I don't think Bond should feel like Bourne. Dalton, when he was Bond, because I was thinking this in my head. I understand Bond is supposed to kind of adapt to the times. Pierce Brosnan is Bond, or at least those first few, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies. This was the mid to late 90s, so a lot of those movies, you still had kind of that 80s, a little bit action tone, but Bond was still Bond. Same with Timothy Dalton, his Bond movies. Those were 87, 89, and that was definitely at that height of the 80s action star, but Bond was still Bond in those movies, and I just feel like in this, I feel like he was almost handicapped. They just were you know what, just do Taken, and do Bourne. Hold on a second. But for me, that's just not Bond. I'm fine. I would have been fine even if you just had that tone, but Bond was still Bond. But he wasn't. He felt like he was just generic. Because most of this movie, it's a revenge story. It immediately follows Casino Royale. And they're trying to find Quantum, which I guess is kind of like Spectre. It's this cool, vague organization, which almost a MacGuffin in this movie. You don't really fully find out what Quantum is, so I feel like that was a waste. And like I was saying, it's like they handicapped Daniel Craig. Because in the last movie, he got to show he could be Bond. Yeah, I even said in the last movie that some of the action scenes were too Bourne-y, but that was some. But even this is just even the straight up editing is it. Because at least Casino Royale was edited still like a Bond movie. This was edited literally like a Jason Bourne movie. And and a lot of it, Bond is just, he wants revenge for what happened to Vesper. And it's just, that's not his character. They should have just went with what happened with Vesper is why Bond doesn't have attachments. That's what they should have did. If they want to do this whole revenge thing, they should have did it off screen and just let Bond be the Bond we know. Because I was a little disappointed. I was just this feels like a Jason Bourne movie. And I wasn't even thinking this watching him, why is he so serious? Yeah, there are moments when Bond has his serious moments, but he still should feel like he should have fun with the character. He still should be suave. He should be charming. He should be charismatic. And I didn't feel like this movie let Daniel Craig even be that. They were just be super serious, and it just didn't work. Camille wasn't an interesting Bond girl. I did like her whole thing is she wanted revenge on Madrano because he killed her parents or whatever, or family. But it's you're not in fucking invested though, because it's just I feel like she was generic. She didn't do it for me. I hated M's portrayal. Yeah, towards the end, she was a little bit like the M we knew, but I felt like she was almost a bad guy. She was just in Bond's way. There were no reason that her and Bond have any contention. In some of the other Bond movies, yes, did she have a little bit of contention sometimes with Bond, but largely, she was always on his side. And granted, yeah, there's a line where she's, I trust him, but it's it felt like throughout the movie, at least the start, it was just, she was just an obstacle, and it was just unnecessary. And it's partially because Judi Dench's M especially, she's my M, and it's they didn't have to do that. Green was a week back. I'm sorry. Especially after fucking Mads Mikkelsen. I just think Dominic Green, he didn't even really care for his plan. He was generic, rich dude, bad guy who wanted to hit on Camille. That's it. It made no sense. And I think there were some okay action pieces. And I think what sucks is there were some recipes for a good Bond movie. You had a lot of exotic locations, Italy, Bolivia. It went through different countries. So it's a little frustrating that we didn't get those Bondisms. And, you know, no M, not no M, no Q, no Monty Penny, no, like, new tech. I get it. They were trying to quote unquote go for realism, but that's not Bond. Bond is not supposed to be Jason Bourne, and unfortunately, it's what it seemed like they were trying to do, and it was frustrating. That's why I was saying handicap Daniel Craig, because Daniel Craig in the last movie showed he can be Bond. Like when Casino Royale let him be Bond. Yeah, did they modernize it a little bit, but he still felt like Bond. They let him showcase that charm. And I just don't think Daniel Craig really got to showcase it in this movie. Besides in like one scene when he was hooking up with the girl who ends up getting oiled later, which I did like that scene. Call back to Goldfinger. So there's little moments. It's just this one tried too hard to fit in with the times to the point you almost fundamentally changed the franchise, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like this whole revenge thing either. Like, Timothy Dalton did that, but he still was Bond. He still got to showcase that charm. And I just didn't feel like Craig in this one got to showcase it besides a couple scenes. Even, and I guess the end. It was like, only a couple scenes. That was the frustrating part to me. So, overall, I'd give this one a 5.5. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I initially had it a 7, then I brought it down to a 6. It's 5.5 just because it's too many problems. When your Bond villain is weak, especially following how good Mads Mikkelsen was, yeah. I did like Jeffrey Wright as Felix Leiter. I thought he was cool, but there wasn't enough of him, so yeah. But aside from that, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I don't think I am going to watch it again. I don't plan on to. If I do get it, well, I hope Skyfall is decent. I've heard that one was alright. Skyfall and Spectre are decent. If they can just feel like Bond movies and let Craig show he can be Bond, and I think he can, and it's just, this one, like, kneecapped him. They just didn't let it. They were like, just do Jason Bourne. Even the way it's edited. Like, some of the fight scenes, you have that, like, super shaky. It works for Jason Bourne, but I also think it just works because that's how the franchise was built, and it's still done in a way where you can still see the action. That's not even really my problem. That's not Bond. It's not supposed to have that, like, tone, and it just, even that scene, there's a scene when M, has him escorted, right, in this elevator, and he beats up all these dudes, and that's a Jason Bourne scene. You could easily take out, Bond and replace it with fucking Jason Bourne. This would just be a Jason Bourne movie. It didn't, that was my beef. And I also feel like the final ending was rushed, because I was watching, like, wait, I was thinking, like, there was a bit more to the movie. I thought, like, okay, we're done, like, there was a bit more. No. Oh, shit, we're already in the final fight. Bond's already fighting the main villain. Oh, okay. I was like, oh, shit, we're already rushing this fight. Yeah, this final act felt so rushed. I was thinking, like, there was more to the movie at a point, like, and there really wasn't. Once they beat him, he then goes to Kazdan to confront, I'm just gonna say some Russian country. I could be fucking up the name. To get some more info, and then that's it. That's how the movie ends. So I just felt like that ending was so rushed. That final act, to a point where it doesn't even feel like a final act. You think there's like a lot more to the movie. I was thinking, oh, there's like maybe another 30 minutes left. Like, oh no, this is it. So yeah, it's 5.5. If you just want to go through the Craig movies the first time, I'd only watch it just to get through to it, but you might find something enjoyable. I'm not saying I completely hate it, but it's definitely, especially how good Casino Royale was, this was definitely a disappointment. So I'm actually in a way kind of happy to watch it at the time. I might have liked it at the time a bit more, but yeah, this was definitely a little bit disappointing just because this tried too hard to be like something else, and it just wasn't what it's supposed to be. So, tomorrow, I'll be doing True Lies, which it's probably James Cameron's really last good movie, in my opinion. I don't like Avatar, really, and I fucking hate Titanic. So yeah, I'll be talking about True Lies tomorrow. One of, like, Arnold's probably, I was going to say underrated, but I don't really think it is. I think that's what one a lot of people love. I mean, that Jamie Lee Curtis scene. And it's just, in general, his chemistry with Jamie Lee Curtis is so good in that movie. So yeah, I'll be doing that tomorrow. But yeah, let's get into Quantum of Solace. So I did like the opening action scene when it pretty much follows right after Casino Royale. He has Mr. White in his car and have like this big chase, which I thought that was cool. That was like that's fucking Bond. That's probably the most Bond feel in general. You know, he's in the middle of a big chase. So that was cool. I didn't like the Bond song. The song itself is not bad. It doesn't fit Bond. It's like the Die Another Day theme to me, where it didn't fit the movie. I did like the little kind of little music video for it, but I didn't particularly care for the song. It felt a little out of place. So just checking some. But overall, I did like this opening. So Bond then gets assigned, because this is where we meet Dominic Green, who's financing Madrona, who's basically this like dictator who Camille wants to kill because he killed her family. So Madrona's like forgotten about. Like, I was reading some comments who were kind of criticizing it. I gotta agree with people who say that this movie didn't really have a story. It kind of didn't. Like, the quantum thing was almost a MacGuffin, because we don't really learn what it is. And that's kind of it, because it's mostly a chase, because Bond is on the hunt for, Mr. Wolf, because Mr. White gets breaking out, and then he has to look for, Dominic Green, who, he's so forgettable as a villain. And then, yeah, it just seems like another problem with this movie. There is no cohesion. I'm not gonna argue with you. If you like this movie, that's fine. But there's no cohesion to the story at all. It just seems like shit kind of happens. Like, even the way he meets Camille. Usually, the way Camille's ties is Dominic Green wants to have her killed because, essentially, because he's like her former, she's like his former girlfriend type of thing. It just seemed like kind of just shit happens just to happen. So yeah, even like some of the chase scenes, like there's a chase scene later, he's like kind of Bond's chasing her down, and it's just not that great. It's too, like I said, it's too Jason Bourne. Bond's supposed to have a certain charm to it. It shouldn't just feel like generic action movie. And that's what it just seemed like they were trying to make. And I'm not a fan of that. I just think Bond it's supposed to have its own little thing where it's not just supposed to be your normal just action movie. Bond has always had its own little, like, the no gadgets. You could have done gadgets and it still be somewhat badass looking. You didn't have to do it like in this goofy, because I think that's what they were trying to act like. Oh, we're trying to go for more realism, but it's like what you did was you just made generic action movie. You take Bond out of it, you could easily put Jason Bourne in it. This could just be another Jason Bourne movie. That's the frustrating part of the movie for me, because one of the things is even a point where M has to, some of like the FBI, not the FBI, but like some people are after Bond who are like in the government. It's like, so this basically is Bourne. That's what ends up happening in that. So it's a little frustrating. And then what they do with M, like, who's constant, she has Bonds because Bond doesn't follow an order because he killed one dude. Even the way it was done was shitty. It makes no sense. M wouldn't do that. She's not going to just have her agent basically because he didn't follow one order. So basically she has like his cards revoked and his movements, like all this shit. She felt like a villain at times. It was weird what they were doing with her. So Bond ends up rescuing Camille, and I guess this is the other problem. I'm gonna say it. I didn't really like that he didn't hook up with the Bond girl. That's the whole point. And I guess you could argue, oh, he's still thinking about Vesper, but it's like, that's not what Bond should be. He shouldn't be what they should have done, realistically, they should have jumped like 2-3 years later. Not like after the whole Vesper thing. Maybe not go immediately after Casino Royale. They should have just jumped to time. Because this should have just... What happened to Vesper should have been why Bond just doesn't get attached. That's all it really should have been. That should have just explained why he doesn't get attached. Because I think ultimately what that does and what they did with that is I fear that this is going to drag through all the next few films. It's just going to be Bond with his revenge shit. Because he's mad about his girlfriend dying. It's like, that's not Bond. Like, Bond's supposed to be a charming, charismatic... I didn't feel like he got to really get to show that. Yeah, there's scenes where he's in, like, a fancy suit, but that's it. It seems like that's the only kind of aesthetic they carried over. Because everything else, he doesn't feel like... he doesn't have that charisma, like I said. They don't let him show it. Because I think in Casino Royale, he got to show it. So it's weird that they're just, like, deciding, no, he's just going to be revenge man. Who's just mad about his girlfriend. I mean, and yeah, I did like his friend he met. I can't think of his name, but he was a decent character. But he gets killed. So that's another thing that adds fuel to Bond's revenge story. I was a little irked by that. I feel like Bond, even in this kind of instance, he should still show his suave and his charisma, because that's his character. I don't know. Like, even, when his, Bond, he ends up getting married and she ends up getting killed in the next movie, Bond, there's a little bit of carryover, but he still showcases that he still, he has those Bondisms, and I just don't think, they didn't let Craig show it in this movie. Besides one, like, a scene, and this scene was almost an hour into the movie. So it's like, that's the other thing. They played the theme at the fucking very end of the movie. So it pulls a Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 where they play the theme in the credits. It's like, what are you doing? Why didn't you have the main Bond theme at least in the opening? Or have it at a part in the movie where, like, maybe he's gearing up. That's the moment you play the song. It's frustrating to me that they didn't play it in the movie. And some would argue they didn't always play the Bond theme, but I don't know. I just think you gotta play that in the movie. I don't fucking care. I don't care what era. That's like not playing the Jurassic Park music in the movie. Sorry. Shit like that pisses me off. Like, what? There's a reason music's iconic in movies, because it makes us remember. There are times, you don't want to spam it. I'm not saying you need to have it in every fucking scene, but holy shit, why would you? To the credits? That's the only time he played the music? Ugh. Even in the opening would have been fine. Ugh. So he breaks into this facility, kills a guy, and this is where, because he doesn't follow an order, basically, this is where he gets his cards, basically, they turn off his cards, and then he goes to Italy. And I just, like, shit, going back to that point, it just seemed like shit was just happening. Like, there was no real cohesion to the plot. So yeah, he runs into, then they go to Italy, they get in a plane, and I think the other problem I had, too, Bond and Camille didn't really have any chemistry. And I also feel like the story Bond is not supposed to just be a million action scenes either. Even like GoldenEye and some of those. And, Die Another Day, which that's probably the most action heavy of, I would say, of the Brosnan ones, even had quiet moments where they let the characters kind of grow. But they don't have that in this movie. Like, I just felt like this movie just was kind of going. And yeah, so their plane gets taken over and they have to break out. Yeah, so then he goes to M. And basically, this is where he gets relieved of his duties, and we get that scene with the... And sorry if it just seems like I'm going all over the place, but that's kind of the movie. The movie goes all over the place. Like I'm saying, there's no, like, real cohesion to the plot, So yeah, where he finds it, because there's this girl he hooks up with, who I thought, that was, like I said, the only scene where that Bond got to be suave and kind of got to showcase his womanizing skills. That's, like, the only scene, and then, like, towards the end. But like, the rest of the movie, he's just kind of... it's just, I feel like this whole revenge, that's not Bond. That's not his character. He's not supposed to go on this revenge arc, and ultimately when you do that, you kind of do just make him not Bond. You just make him generic action guy. And I love my action movies, but Bond is supposed to just kind of be a little bit, not above, but it's supposed to be a little bit different to just your normal action movie. And it just seemed like I said, they're just adapting to they're trying to make him like Jason Bourne. Because, this was post, like, I think Bourne Ultimatum had just come out the year before. So it's like, let's just do Bourne with Bond. And I just didn't like it. And that's one thing, like, if I had paid, had this mindset at the time, I should have saw that coming with Casino Royale, like, because there were points where I was like, yeah, but Casino Royale still had Bondisms in it, so I kind of can overlook it, but I just think they're like, fuck it, we're just gonna throw it out. Or go full, like, Jason Bourne, or, not even just Jason Bourne, but, like, mid to late 2000s, like, action movie. You're gonna have those Bourne jump cuts, every hit, like that elevator scene was basically a Jason Bourne scene. It really was. Yeah, Bond does have like hand-to-hand skills, but it just like that scene was straight up Bourne. It didn't even feel like you can't tell me any different. Like that was just a Jason Bourne action scene, but with Bond, and I was a little disappointed. And like I said, Dominic Green really doesn't even have a presence in the film. Like you compare him to Mads Mikkelsen. It just isn't close. It's like, what happened? I don't know. I just felt like they went for a generic villain guy. And then Medrano, you kind of forget about. You kind of forget he's in the movie. And then, like I said, they break out, and then we get this action scene in the end. Like, this movie kind of just rushes just to get to that final action sequence, which you almost don't even notice is the final action sequence. I was thinking there was a bit more to the movie. But I was like, oh, that's it. Because, yeah, they break into the facility. Camille ends up killing Medrano. Basically gets revenge for her family. While Bond he doesn't kill him, but he basically incapacitates Green. The facility blows up. Bond leaves Green in the desert. And then basically we don't see Camille again. And then he goes to whatever. I think I said cat. I could be fucking wrong. Whatever. I'll just say Russia. I don't fucking care. And I did like this sequence where we do get a little bit of Bond and he ends up not killing him, and then we have a nice little scene with him and him. I did like that, but the movie itself just, I know I'm reiterating, basically repeating myself a lot, but it didn't feel like Bond. It was too Jason Bourne. They're going like too far on the other side where they basically were just like, we're just going to make Jason Bourne, but with James Bond. It just doesn't work. You don't have any of the things that made Bond unique, from just being, your normal action movie. And I just feel like they just went with that. And if you wanted to, like, Living Daylights, like I said, that was in that 80s era with Timothy Dalton. So, I understand that, but, like, I understand, like, Bond's always kind of adapted to the time. So, like, a lot of those 80s ones, especially, like, once Dalton came in, they did go for a more 80s action tone, but Bond still felt like Bond. Same with the Brosnan movies, which went into the more somewhat modern action movies, but Bond got to still be Bond. You got to still see the cool tech. It still had that unique feel. Like, they blended it, and I just feel like this one didn't do it at all. Casino Royale did it, and then they said, fuck blending it, we're just gonna make it Jason Bourne. Basically, we're gonna make it Bourne 4 unofficially. It's what it felt like. And the sad thing is, there were, like, in terms of, like, Quantum, if they had really explored it and not just made it essentially a MacGuffin that we just kept passing the bunk on, and you don't really learn what the fuck it is. And maybe the next one we may know, but it's like, I just think Bond needed those little things that make it unique. And Craig, I just feel like didn't even get to showcase it. Because he was great as Bond. I think in the second movie, if they just let him be Bond, he would have been great. because I think he was great in the first one, but to see him in that, but full on established now that, you know, he doesn't have what, like, going back to what I said, they should have just had Vesper's death be basically the cause of why Bond doesn't have straight up attachments and, you know, doesn't get married and isn't get tied down or none of that. That's all she should have been. I didn't need this whole revenge thing, and it just ultimately led to, you just made generic action movie. Bond just felt like generic action guy from the mid-2000s. And unfortunately, that's what hurts this movie. Camille just isn't an interesting Bond girl. Dominic Green's a weak-ass villain. He just... I won't say he's the worst Bond villain, but he's pretty weak. He didn't do anything for me. So overall, I'd give this movie a 5.5. I think there's decent parts. That scene where the girl's covered in oil, I like that. That was a callback to, you know, GoldenEye, but with oil. That was cool. Goldfinger, sorry, not GoldenEye. Goldfinger. So I thought that was cool. It was a cool little touch, and even in the same style in the bed. But everything else, it just was a little disappointing that they just decided to go full Bourne, and it just doesn't work with Bond. Like, you could have still showed off cool tech and, you know, do it in a modern way and it'd still be cool. So, I think they should have leaned a little bit into the Bondisms. I hope Skyfall does. I've heard positive things about that one. And I've heard the Bond song itself actually at least has like an old Bond sound to it. So, maybe the movie itself hopefully is actually Bond and at least leans into it. Let Craig... Because I think Craig can be a good Bond. I just think this one just didn't let him show it. They went too far. I hope they kind of dial it back in the next one. And, okay, fine, if you have a little bit of modern shit in it, and fine. But have Bond still be Bond. Let him just be a fun, charismatic character. So we'll see. I've never seen it, so going in blind on that one, too. So I'll be reviewing that next Tuesday. But Quantum of Solace is a 5.5. I don't think I'm going to watch it again. Although I think it's a one watch for me. So tomorrow, True Lies review, one of the best action movies ever made. And still, I was still kind of saying that Arnold in his prime. So Jamie Lee Curtis, I thought they had some of the best chemistry ever. And you wouldn't, in a weird way, you wouldn't think they would, but they had great chemistry in that, you know, that scene, you know, with Jamie Lee Curtis in the bed. So, but anyway. So I'll be doing that tomorrow, Thursday, Equalizer 1, but let's go. Tomorrow, like I said, True Lies, so, but Quantum of Solace was disappointing a little bit, especially considering how great Casino Royale is, and I don't blame people who put that up there with, like, some of their top Bond movies. So, anyway, guys, I'm gonna cheers and peace out. Alright, y'all. See y'all later. Peace.